This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Methodify by Delvinia. Get real-world customer feedback in hours, not weeks. Schedule your demo and get a free $20 Amazon gift card. Go to methodify.it/BeanCast and Methodify it today. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 592, Dying to GIF. Monday, May 11th, 2020. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. Well, the time is nigh. As Australia and Europe navigate their reopenings and the US begins the journey regionally, brands and their marketers must wrestle once again with message adjustment and refining in-store experiences. Are we up to the challenge? We'll discuss. Also, retail is content play, why the FTC is seeking ad tech pros, GIPHY's pandemic growth surge, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder of the idea integration company, the one and only Mr. Saul Colt. I almost flubbed your company again. I can't believe this.
It's the catchiest thing to remember. But
I know.
Thank you for having me on the show.
It's so hard to flub that line, and yet I do it. Now, next, she's the CEO of both Twit.tv and Artisanal Agency. Say hello to Ms. Lisa Laporte. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Bob. How's it going?
It's going great. And finally, he's a partner at Together With, an innovative shop blending creative and production services. Mr. Doug Livingston joins us. Hi, Doug.
Hey, Bob. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for coming back. Hey, we've got a lot to cover, and one of the biggest topics of this week was the reemergence of commerce in the world. Australia, Italy, and many parts of the U.S. are among those regions beginning to slowly reopen, giving us an emerging glimpse at what life after quarantine might actually look like. So for tonight, I thought it would be worth a discussion of kinds on what's working and what brands have to do to prepare. So Lisa, what will public interactions look like for the foreseeable future, according to the articles and according to your own estimation? And can we really expect people to adhere to any of these new social norms in any kind of meaningful way? Your thoughts?
Well, first I'd like to say this is a lot to cover, but the first thing I do want to point out is that I feel that some brands are doing this right, and I feel that what brands do during this time will definitely be remembered. And I think right now the best thing brands can do is turn to digital, social media, and what they need to do is reinvent how they're going to engage their audiences, because you want to pull people in. So some really good examples I saw were McDonald's putting out their puzzles while people are staying at home.
Right.
What a great way to advertise, by sticking a puzzle out there. But I really don't see people behaving well right now, and I'm starting to see stores reopen, demanding masks be put on. So I think brands are really going to have to pay attention to what people want and how their fans are going to react to it, because you're seeing brands such as Costco requiring everybody to wear a mask, and then you're seeing a backlash from some of the people that are saying, I don't want to wear a mask. I want to come to your store, so I'm going to boycott your store. But then if you think about that, if they weren't requiring masks and everybody had a huge outbreak at a Costco, which I believe has happened, then that's going to be another detriment. So I really think now is the time for brands to evolve, pay attention to what people are going to need. But I really think this is going to come away from a physical experience and be more of a digital experience, and then find ways to allow people to come back in to retail stores, wearing masks and things like that. But when you take a look at what happened in Australia, as well as even in Georgia, the shopping malls are packed. People aren't wearing masks, and I believe a second resurgence is going to come out because of this. So I think it's time for brands to shift and pivot and switch to digital. That's going to be the best way, I feel, to engage with people, especially when you take a look at the United States of America. We don't even have a federal plan on how to roll this out. Every state is taking this on themselves and handling it in their own unique way. So it's going to be interesting to see how brands continue to pivot. And that's what we're doing, at least what I'm seeing in my own, with our own clients, is that we're finding other ways to grab people that are, staying in place, working from home, and other ways to actually engage, people to be excited about a brand and then actually then in turn go and make a purchase.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, about really not looking at this as an opportunity to reimagine the in-store experience or try to fix all the problems with social distancing that are inevitably going to be part of this, but to look at the problem as a digital problem and really reimagine how we interact with consumers on an ongoing basis, as opposed to how do we fix it and make it go back to normal. Saul, you were going to say something. I had to interrupt. Sorry.
No, that's cool. So I think there's no way brands can win in the very early stages of this because, like Lisa said, you tell people you've got to wear gloves and a mask. There's always going to be people who are going to complain and stuff like that. I think that, when you speak of moving to digital, yes, absolutely. Brands need to do this. I think they're going to completely reimagine what the shopping experience is like. You see these big box department stores like Neiman Marcus and places like that, filing for bankruptcy. A lot of the reason they're filing for bankruptcy, besides, thousands of employees, is they're sitting on real estate that they have to pay rent for and things like that. I think we're going to see a very different approach to retail. I've been, sort of telling people it needs to be high touch and, done differently. I want to see virtual personal shoppers. I think this is actually a really interesting opportunity for big box retailers to collect way more data on people. If you've got all my measurements, all my likes, all my dislikes, you can have somebody physically run through the store on a FaceTime, hold things up on a hanger, and still only have 25 people in this enormous store. Or maybe it's not even a store anymore. Maybe they're working out of, a warehouse or something, or just like a TV set that's made to look like a much smaller environment, and they're pulling things. There's a lot of really interesting things, but I think through all this, retail is going to be reimagined because I think it needs to be so much more high touch to make up for, how do you get people to impulse buy digitally? It doesn't work that way. Walmart and all these companies made a killing on just putting all the $2 snack items right at the cash because they know you're going to throw it in and stuff like that. Someone's going to need to figure out how to do that. And just do you want more fries with that, through digital isn't going to work. From an advertising standpoint, I think it's going to be really interesting, whoever's the first brand to reflect, what's going on. And what I mean by what's going on, I want to see a brand put people in a mask in a commercial and not mention it. Show, don't tell. So there shouldn't be a voiceover where they're like, we know everybody is this, or whatever the voiceover is, where you're calling out the mask. Just have people doing what they're supposed to be doing, wear a mask in an ad, and it'll probably be the most talked about thing. It'd be the same as the first mixed race couple that was in a commercial, or same-sex couple. I'm amazed somebody hasn't done that yet, because from an advertising standpoint, people are so, I'm fatigued by all the, let's air high five each other. We're all doing a wonderful job. It is time to actually move into the new normal, what that is, and actually start reflecting it in advertising, because advertising is supposed to be a mirror held up to society. And I don't see anybody doing that right now. It's all been, let's all pat ourselves on the back for doing a great job.
Yeah, good points there. I'd love to bring Doug in on the conversation as well, because this goes right up your alley. I mean, this is what you've been doing for most of your career, is reimagining the brand experience as a digital experience. So tell us a little bit about what you think about the moves that brands are making, and is there any bright spot that we're missing?
No, I think I agree with everything that's been said. We wrote a communications framework early on around three H's: help, hope, and happiness, to help brands kind of categorize where they can authentically put out messaging in those three areas. And we have a fourth H coming out called heal. And heal is really about how you reinvent yourself after chaos and destruction. And that requires the brands to do a lot of self-evaluation and think about all the things that were just mentioned, about how they're going to connect in a different way with consumers. I am seeing a lot of brands come out with some innovative advertising. I don't know if you've seen the Rossmann ad in Germany, where, you know, it's a drugstore like a Rite Aid here, and they made it look like a club, like people were going into a club with masks, and it turns out she's just listening to her headphones going into a drugstore, you know, making a purchase. And it was a really brilliant ad, because I think part of the heal process is using humor and shared experience to connect with consumers in a new way. There's also an ad out from Bullet Whiskey about drinking with friends.
Yeah.
And they picture different devices all around the house that look like a person with eyes and ears, a nose and a mouth. And, you know, having a drink with your new friends. I think that's been very successful. If you saw the TD Bank ad, one of their most successful ads was the guy dancing after hours and then connecting with the consumer, and they redid that at home, and the actor shot it himself with his iPhone. So I think you're seeing some of the brands starting to take tentative steps. I think a lot of them are still concerned about the perception and how they're going to connect, and it's not the same rule book that it used to be before. And we're really recommending that brands take a breath, reevaluate who they are and how they're connecting, create a playbook, talk to their creatives, talk to their consumers and clients and their employees, and then start to move forward step by step, instead of trying to do the same playbook that they were doing before.
Well, that's a good segue into the next part of this conversation, which is who is doing it right. I mean, what sectors seem to be getting it more right than others? Lisa, in your estimation, watching the marketplace, seeing what's going on, you know, we can pull apart and always find an individual advertiser who's doing it well, but are any sectors doing it well right now? Retail, travel, whatever. I mean, who's doing it right? And by converse, who's doing it wrong?
I have really been enjoying the insurance commercials. I don't know if you have been tuning into that, but with, you know, people driving less, everybody's offering discounts. But I do have to admit, I agree with everybody on this panel from the perspective of, I'm tired of the high fives. I tell you, if I have to hear a piano music in another commercial, I mean, like, am I the only one who's noticing that? So the brands that are catching my eye, besides the insurance, I have to tell you, the Progressive commercials are hysterical with everybody on the bad Zoom calls. So I think finding some humor in this time is probably good to be doing at this particular moment. But then people like, you know, McDonald's putting out puzzles. I'm seeing some food industry with takeout really on the rise. I've been seeing like Instacart, people having, you know, grocery shoppers that have overcome some of the hurdles, because they also were getting trouble early on by not protecting the people that were going to the stores. So I think brands need to start pivoting a little bit quicker, because I'm with you. I want to see more masks on air at this particular point. I think we're missing that point, since it's kind of divided within the United States. At least I see a lot of people in my own hometown refusing to put on a mask. So I would like to see more and more companies continue to shift to that. So I think some of those companies have early on already grabbed it, and I think right now I'm still seeing the rest of the brands struggling. I'd be curious to see what Saul and, you know, Doug think about this too.
Yeah, what do you guys think about this? I mean, it's just like, what sectors are getting it right and what sectors are doing it completely wrong?
So go ahead, Doug.
I think the sectors that are really being hit hard by the retail aspect of it, the lack of traffic, and the expenses that they're incurring, they're focused on other things. They're not really focused in the consumer way. They're focused operationally. And
yeah, you're
those are the
talking about
ones
like
that are
you're talking about the
struggling
travel industry in particular. It got
travel
really hammered.
industry, I think the fashion industry,
Bar and
anybody
restaurants.
that's really,
Bar and restaurants as well. Yeah.
the restaurants. I think when Tom Colicchio came out, I thought he came out with a brilliant plan talking about, utilizing the commercial route for foodstuffs and translating that into a consumer storefront. He said, we already have the infrastructure. Everything is already in place. We can take that milk that's being dumped. We can take those hogs and chickens that are being slaughtered and not used. We can actually distribute that to consumers. We have the network here already. Those kind of solutions need to be embraced and brought forward and supported. Again, as was mentioned earlier, federally, we don't really have a direction. We don't have a plan. We don't have anything in place. So it's really going to be up to brands and businesses to band together, come up with the solutions, and connect with consumers in a new way.
And Saul, your thoughts?
So I haven't seen a whole lot that's really stood out for me on either side, good or bad, which is really, it's important to sort of comment on both sides. There's nobody who I think has put their foot in their mouth, and there's nobody that's like blown me away with anything. And I think part of the problem is, besides the fact that, people are living in a little bit of fear right now, fear for losing their jobs, fear for putting their foot in their mouth and getting called out. One of the real risks of taking any chances right now is the fact that everybody's watching. So, the chance of actually making a misstep is much higher. But at the same time, that's the whole reason you should be doing it, not to make a misfire, but brands should be way more vocal than they are. Because, we've talked a million times over the last few years when we talk about TV ratings and all these things. And when there was only 3 networks, you had, episodes of television got 30, 40 million people tuning in. Well, guess what? You actually have that audience now, and brands aren't taking advantage of it. And, whether it's personal fear, because the thing we always forget, we talk about brands, but they're really people who are sticking their neck out and worried about losing a job, especially in this climate and things like that. But there's nothing that stands out either way for me, and that's disappointing, because I want to see some people like, this is such an opportunity for the right brands, and people aren't really jumping at it, and it's I guess it's fine. But I was saying to somebody earlier that the world isn't better. We're still in like a bad place and everything like that, and we should all be still staying inside. But it just kind of feels like we've been in panic mode too long now. It made perfect sense at the beginning, and with all the horrific job cuts and everything, maybe that was an overreaction, maybe not. I guess only time will tell. But I don't know, and this isn't backed by any data. This is just my gut. Man, I think the world needs the fact that people are protesting, staying in their homes and wearing masks, shows that people are looking for something else than they're getting right now. The boredom is set in, and there isn't that distraction for them. They've bled through every episode of whatever they're watching on Netflix. They really need something else. And I'm not one to be opportunistic around a crisis, but the ad industry should be tripling down on new hires instead of throwing people out, because this is kind of like the moment for so many industries, advertising being one of them, because man, you've got an audience, they're captive, they're bored, some of them might have $1,200 in their pocket that just showed up. There's all sorts of factors that brands should be all over, and instead they're really playing it too safe, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, all these points are well taken. And I mean, I think that there is a misappropriation of anxiety. There's a misappropriation of which sectors are important and which sectors have opportunities. We're looking at the problems with advertising, but we have to consider there's other industries that also have tremendous opportunities that are not taking advantage of them, which is, for me, entertainment is one of the key shining sectors that is completely being decimated at this point when it really shouldn't be. When you're talking about the film industry or the theater industry or any of these opportunities to talk, I'm sorry, I'm completely losing my train of thought. So, but
there
are some people
go ahead.
I think there are some people in the entertainment industry, like in New York, if you look at the public theater, they're starting to stream a lot of their plays and stuff they have in the can. People are slowly starting to adapt. I think to Saul's point earlier, brands are kind of missing the opportunity, partly because they're not reinventing their strategy and seeing where they can play in the right areas. The second part of the equation that's difficult is I think we're extremely stratified as to who has the dollars to spend, who has the time to spend. At least when I look at the East Coast and the West Coast and the larger cities, there are people who are basically taking a camping adventure and they have a lot of free cash and they're still working. They're working from home. Then there's a whole sector of people who are really struggling. They don't have public assistance yet. They can't make their rent. They're not thinking about spending any money. And I think brands really have to understand where their consumers are, where they are, and what they can provide, and what's the revenue model for them to move forward. And they have to be able to do it in an agile way and be able to adapt quickly, because I'm not as optimistic about the next 12 to 18 months. I think we're going to have stops and starts and stops and starts, and brands are going to have to adjust accordingly. And it's going to be a difficult landscape moving forward. And if you aren't strategically sound and grounded and have a team together and are able to execute and adapt quickly, you're going to be in trouble.
Well, so I agree. There's going to be stops and starts, and from what everyone's saying, with there's going to be another wave in the fall and things like that. But like, companies need to be planning for these things now. Nobody knew that this first wave was coming, so there's no way anybody could honestly say they were on top of it and things like that. But if you're not planning for a second wave as part of your marketing plan, then that's you're just not prepared in any way right now. And if we have to live through, and I know this is maybe going to come off as insensitive, but if in the fall, when everything starts again, if we have to live through another round of just awful advertising where people are just waving an American flag and showing people in scrubs for any brand in any industry for any product and things like that, and saying thank you, I think it's a real bad use of time, money, and planning. Like I've said a number of times, you thank the frontline workers. They're saving our lives. They're the most important people right now. In no way am I belittling their effort or anything like that. But like, companies, instead of spending $1 million on a really poorly placed stock photography TV commercial with a throaty voiceover, give that $1 million to the frontline workers in some way, and give us an ad that resembles like the situation in the world right now. So I'd almost rather see car companies talking in an ad about how they're doing by appointment only, or they're doing touchless sales, or all these things that actually are probably going to be around for the next 12 months. Show me the car winding through the mountains and, the beautiful mirror-like finish on the doors and everything. And then just talk about it as if this is like, I almost think somebody has to take an approach where it's like, this is how it's always been. Stop saying it's new. Stop saying, this is what we're doing. Just say, this is reality. And don't even say this is reality right now. Just say, this is what we're doing now. This is the way it's always been. And if they take that attitude, I think people will actually stop with the panicking and stop with the protests. The fact that, people are unwilling to wear a mask or anything, like they see this as an enormous inconvenience, it's a shame, because people are actually really dying. But, if there's a learning lesson from that, you could say that people are just fed up. So why don't we shift things around? Let's try new messaging, because maybe you can actually convince these people through a clever, funny ad that they should be wearing. Like if Walmart or Costco or any of these people came out with a really tasteful but humorous and maybe self-effacing ad about why people need to wear masks in their offices, people might look at it very differently. Right now, it's all these freedom fighters, which are ridiculous. It's like, it's like it's like, don't take my guns, don't take my masks. Like it's ridiculous. But that's kind of the mentality of some people.
But the core of your point, though, comes down to, that essential services are broader than we at first took a look at. I mean, we can talk about the frontline workers being the people who are staffing the grocery stores and the people who are
people are driving buses or just
the nurses,
as much at risk as other people.
But if you go even broader than that, it's just like, what's the one thing that's kept most of us sane? And this is my point earlier, which I was flubbing, was the fact that the entertainment industry is such an important and crucial part of keeping America sane, keeping the world sane at this time as we're locked in quarantine. Why is that not considered an essential service? Why is that not also being, lifted up? And then to your larger point of, these are opportunities for brands. I mean, because so many people are caught in a captive situation and they're watching this content, it's a perfect opportunity for brands to get in there and talk in a meaningful way to consumers at a moment when they're most paying attention.
But I think this is also laying bare the fact that so many brands don't have a clear picture of who they are. The reason we're seeing the same ad is because the creatives are getting the same brief.
Yes.
Like there is, I guarantee you, if you put all those briefs and stack them up, they're exactly the same.
Yeah, I believe
they don't want to take risks.
Well, but then shame on the creative team. They should be pushing back, and they should be saying, yeah.
Some of the go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go, Lisa.
I was going to say some of the brands that I've been seeing that we work with that I'm really enjoying is brands like Mint Mobile. They're saying, you know what, we're going to give you a month free, switch to our service. So now giving you an iPhone and a really low amount. I've also seen car commercials in which we were talking about cars, and this was another brand, that's I'm feeling embracing this correctly, where they're saying, hey, we can help you get your car 90 days before you make your first payment. We can do everything, as you said, touchless. You don't even have to come in. It's by appointment only, things along those lines. But I agree with you. I've been reaching out to all of my direct clients going, hey, let's pivot. How do we help you take your message to that next level? And I feel that people are just like still in shock that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it's time to get out of that and try something. I don't mind starting and stopping, but we got to start.
If you look at the ad from Ryan Reynolds for Mint, I don't know if you guys have seen that for his Mint cell phone service. It's him doing a Zoom PowerPoint presentation. It's hilarious. They have a reduced cost for COVID. He's helping with humor. And I'll bet you he's signing up a ton of people because it's the exact right brand for what we need right now. People who are struggling with cash, people who want to reduce their expenses. It's far less than the other services, and he's doing it really well.
It's what we've been saying on the show for some time now. I mean, even before COVID came and became a reality in our lives, we always said that marketing needed to be pivoting toward becoming a service. And if your marketing is not providing a real service that's meaningful to the consumer at this moment, you shouldn't be doing it. I mean, it's just like, it's one thing to establish your identity, but marketing as a whole needs to establish identity while it's providing some kind of meaningful service, or else we're not going to get the attention of the consumer. There's too many other distractions. Well, I'm going to continue this conversation in another vein. In just a minute, we're going to talk about making the cut as an example of retail as content. Let's put it that way. It's an interesting way to think about the future of retail and how we can go forward. But we're going to get to that in just a moment. First, I got to talk about our sponsor, Methodify by Delvinia, and give you or someone you know another chance to get a $20 Amazon gift card just for checking them out. Now, behind every brand are real people like you or me or your coworkers or your employees making decisions. And if you're all making those decisions now, you're probably doing so while in a terribly stressful situation, talking to consumers who are also highly stressed and sensitive at this moment. Say one thing wrong in your advertising and you could unleash a social firestorm against your brand because people are just looking to vent their anger and frustration right now. This is where our sponsor, Methodify by Davinia, can help, because Methodify collects real feedback from your actual customers on concepts or creative before you release it to the world. And the entire process takes only hours, not days. Methodify gives insight professionals and senior marketing people the information they need to power better decisions that will protect their brands and themselves. Now, just a few weekends ago, Methodify was used to test digital creative for a fast food chain to make sure that the messaging wasn't tone deaf. And the results were invaluable information for them, and Methodify can do the same for you to protect you just like it protected them. Actual customer feedback is a game changer because right now brands that wait and see are going to wind up making costly mistakes. Now, of course, we want you to connect with your customers. We want you to build brands, build trust, build fans, serve the consumer, but test everything. And Methodify can get you started today. Now, to find out more about Methodify and to set up a demo, just Methodify it. Literally, go to methodify.it/BeanCast. If you need me to spell it, I'll spell it out for you. It's methodify.it/BeanCast. And as a way of saying thanks, every BeanCast listener who signs up and completes a demo will receive a $20 Amazon gift card just for your time. And don't keep this to yourself, okay? So if you have somebody that you know who's in this space, if you have an associate, if you have a friend, tell them about Methodify, because this is their opportunity to find out more and get the $20 gift card. So again, that address is methodify.it/BeanCast, and we thank them very much for their support of our program. Well, the new Amazon show, Making the Cut, I watched this a few weeks ago. It's a fascinating study in both reimagining retail as a content driver and creating instant connection to the buying experience. Basically, the premise is it's just like Project Runway, only they work with actual working established designers to put out new lines of clothing and establish a global brand. But they're tied in exclusively with Amazon, where winners' projects or winners' winning styles are immediately available for purchase as soon as the show goes up. And they were selling out every single one of these items within minutes after the show started coming on the air. So this has been tremendously successful for them. It's part of a bigger play that they've been doing for some time in this space, Amazon in particular. And it really dovetails nicely into a lot of the conversation going on right now that retail needs to reimagine itself as a content studio type situation. So Saul, what lessons can both online and offline retail take away from this effort? What are your thoughts on Making the Cut and the larger story about retail becoming a content experience for influencers and for other type of players to promote your brand?
Okay, so this is like a modern day reinterpretation of the infomercial, and to be honest with you, I love it. It's really genius because it's like Shark Tank in the way that you get the TV coverage, but they don't actually have to put anything like money out of their own pocket to make money, whereas in Shark Tank, you have to make an investment because one, they own the network, they own the shows, they own the sales platform, and even, for some, they own the device you're watching it on, and it all comes with a baked in buy it now button. So if you think of infomercials, you had to wait till the end, you had to call Roanoke, Virginia, or wherever. It always seemed like you were sending money to the same place, and then you had to wait and everything. This is just a big, enormous ad done in the most cleverly, beautifully designed way. But it's also great because it funds the show. It's a way to test audience interest and keep people coming back to all the platforms involved. So what makes Amazon efforts particularly unique is the sheer ease in which they're transforming people from viewer to consumer. Because like I said, the button's already there. Amazon's the only place you can get it. And brands have tried to do this with online shops in the past, but they're a detour from your everyday behavior. You're already buying on Amazon, so you already have that either love or hate sort of feeling about them, but at least you know that they're part of your everyday life. I assume a lot of people will check this out from the show. Maybe they buy an item or don't buy an item, but they're going to be back on Amazon after watching the show. And once you're there, like maybe you don't buy the outfit today and you just buy toilet paper and plastic gloves or whatever, but you're still buying something from Amazon, and they're very, very smart. They're going to be tracking these clicks and know where people are coming from and delivering all sorts of things. So the only dangerous thing I see, and it's even really a very, very minor thing in the grand scheme of things, I think a lot of people check that. I think a lot of people aren't going to see this for what it is, and it's an ad. They're not going to understand that, this is going to be new, this is going to be strange, this is going to be different. And the other thing, I think, if people don't realize it's an ad and it takes off and it becomes this financial home run for Amazon, it'll actually detour. I think everyone's going to be fast to follow. And if they're fast to follow, it's going to deter actually making original content and original creative stuff that doesn't have a store component to it. And then we may never get to go back to seeing shows like Breaking Bad and stuff like that you can't buy meth online. So what's the point of making that show?
But can anyone really follow fast on this? Because Amazon has the infrastructure that very few other players can even come close to. I mean, this ability to instantly translate this online content experience into a buying experience is something that they pretty much own. I mean, they own that space in terms of...
Also, they've had tremendous learning as well. They started out with Frankie Grande on Style Code, which was their sort of QVC ripoff, and it was considered a failure, but they had tremendous learnings from that. They've also done a lot of celebrity storefronts. Chris Pratt and J.J. Watt and all those guys have put together their not only video content, but what's selling and what's not selling. I think when Clume came along, what really separates this from the others, honestly, for me, is the creative layer on top. I think what sells it is the story, the creative, the shift on the focus away from craft and more to business. If you notice, if you compare it to her previous show,
Project
it was really
Runway.
all about the sewing, about the craft element of it. This one was not about that at all. They brought people in to sew the clothes. It was about the business, the presentation. How was it working for Amazon? What was it about sales? This appealed to entrepreneurs as well as fashionistas, and I think it was a brilliant home run on the creative layer. Could other people duplicate that? They could. She's pretty unique, and that combination is pretty unique, and the story is pretty great, right? Like, it hit right now perfectly. So I think we will see a lot more of that. But
the bigger question, though, is do you need to replicate that, or is it just a kind of the tip of the iceberg of a huge content opportunity for retail as a whole? Like I say, there's another article, companion article, not about making the cut, that I found this week, talking about how the retail space can be reimagined as a content studio, and how influencers, if they're given a reason to take pictures, if they're given a reason to video blog their experience in your store, they will, because their social currency is in views of their content. And if you're giving them something interesting to film, that's a huge opportunity for them. So this is the beginning of a huge trend that if retailers don't take advantage of immediately, if, we're talking about physical retailers, not just the online space, but physical retailers don't take advantage of this, they're really going to miss out. I want to bring Lisa in on this, because Lisa was, trading emails with me earlier.
Watching Making the Cut.
Yeah, but you were trading emails with me, and you were completely.
I agree. I think the content, first of all, is amazing. If the content wasn't amazing, maybe the experience wouldn't have been so positive for Amazon in return. But if you take a look, people are already doing this. Look, Apple just announced their platform. All of their programs, anybody on there, what are they holding? They're holding iPhones. They're playing on, Apple laptops, etc. I don't think they're going to ever get to the experience that that Amazon's capturing with doing this. But I think more and more people, if you are making amazing content, why can't you attach a buying element to it? You put in brands in the content of the show. It's there. And then maybe afterwards you could say, check here, and you can check out on any of those items that you saw, whether it's clothing or cars or, or a food experience or something. I think more and more brands can integrate this. Do I feel that anyone's in position like an Amazon? Not yet. But I have a feeling you're going to see more and more people becoming creative, especially amidst this crisis. I mean, it's just brilliant that this is already going, and now we're in the middle of a pandemic. I think more and more brands are going to have to start finding ways to become creative and reaching, the buyers. And
But imagine if you took a Dick's Sporting Goods or even a Masterclass and you connected some of those really great creative experiences to an e-com backend with the learning capability. You really could have a powerhouse on your hands, but brands have to really shift their thinking, really understand who they are and what they can deliver, and come up with that creative layer that's going to knock people, it's going to knock it out of the park for them.
If you were to couple a network with Shopify and a big box retailer, this could be replicated reasonably quickly, as long as they have the right, creative people in hand. So I do think it's brilliant. I think it's great. But I do think that it is something that could be replicated, maybe not to the same extent, because I think part of the reason that this works so great is there's years and years of fans already following Heidi Klum and Tim, I can't remember his last name.
Tim Gunn.
Tim Gunn from their previous shows. So I'm sure a lot of people would come just thinking it's a Project Runway in a new network. And then they'll either like it or not like it. And then, as you mentioned, the entrepreneurial side of things, I think they bring a bit of a different audience, but chances are those people weren't there on episode 1. They had to hear about it at another time. So this was something they already had a built-in audience with from the two hosts. The format isn't that different from their other shows. It's brilliant what they pulled off, but I do think, you find the right 3 people. Like Amazon has all the sun, the moon, and the stars aligned already, but you find the right 3 people, and this could be done again.
It's really going to come down to the content. You're going to have to really have the right content, because the hook's not going to matter if the content isn't there.
And what a great place for agencies to play. Like, this is where creatives should be pivoting. It's not about the 15 and the 30. It's about more long-form content, deeper, richer experience, and really selling that. To Sean's point, one of the reasons that really works with Heidi Klum is because Heidi and Tim and Naomi Campbell, those 3 together, people tuned in for drama. They tuned in for the interaction and the emotional part of that puzzle. That's what advertising does at its best. But why can't we just apply that?
But there's a problem with that, and that's the fact that under the current restrictions and the probability that these restrictions are going to be in effect for some time, putting a show of that caliber, of that quality together is not going to happen. I mean, it's not going to happen for a long time. And, that's a big problem, to look at it. So that you need to think more broadly. And I think that's one of the geniuses of this show, from Amazon's standpoint, is they didn't just rely entirely on the content, because I agree with you guys. The content was great and it sucked you in, and it kind of the centerpiece of any kind of strategy that would follow would need to be based on that kind of content. But they also did something that I don't think a lot of people paid attention to. A lot of people heard that $1 million quote unquote prize that was given to the winner. That's not $1 million $1 million for them to go to Tahiti. That's $1 million investment in their company. And that's an Amazon investment in the company. And it's reimagining the entire experience of bringing a brand to market and then taking an investment and then giving them the ad support and the promotion and the every advantage possible to take them to the next level. That's the true genius of this, because, if a brand like Walmart were to try something like this, or Target, probably more likely, you could have this opportunity to launch brand new brands or reinvest in old brands or reinvigorate old brands just by giving them that attention to detail and that investment and that opportunity to shine. There's a lot of brands waiting to go national, waiting to go global, but can't quite make that turn without some kind of investment from the bigger brands out there. And this is an opportunity that can't be squandered. It's got to be looked at in that light.
And that infrastructure is actually already in place. When we worked with several brands with Walmart, for example, every year they set up a Walmart and people come and pitch to sell a 4x8 space, right? But those are big brands that come in and do that. This is almost jumping that and going direct to consumer, right?
Right.
Walmart could do exactly that. Dick's Sporting Goods could do exactly that. Like, there's lots of different big box brands that could utilize their firepower to connect directly with consumers and create that into a marketing bonanza for them.
So this is an interesting spin-off opportunity for Shark Tank. They could actually completely rip off the idea completely, and instead of the 4-minute pitch, you get 15 weeks of 8 people slashing each other's throat, or taking it to another extent. This is, NBC should be watching this and go, we can relaunch The Apprentice this way. And instead of like all those.
I think The Apprentice brand is pretty much dead in the water at this point.
Probably, but it would work. And it's interesting. And here's the title for today's show. It really makes you realize that the 15-second isn't as important as the 15-week. And I think some people will start thinking a little more like that.
Oh, this is a conversation that I would love to continue, but we got to move on to our next topic. The FTC is finally getting the hint that maybe they don't understand ad tech. And they're currently looking to hire pros from the space to help them better navigate regulation there. Doug, this is obviously a good sign, quote unquote, but do you expect it to amount to much? I mean, what's your take on this move by the FTC and what's coming next?
Look, I think it's probably long overdue. I think they do need to get the expertise in place. But to be honest, I blame the ad industry itself. Like we have not cleaned up our own house. When I started building digital teams 15 years ago, we were sort of marginalized and pushed to the side at that time. When fragmentation really accelerated, we were then seen as a threat to the traditional agency. We were, quote unquote, stealing budgets. We were ruining creative with our analytics. We were doing all of this stuff to the ad industry in our own house. And so that was a whole thing we had to face. And I think when it really took a turn is there was a few big players. I remember being in Cincinnati at P&G. They got up on stage and said, you will shift to digital. The budgets are changing, and you will make it work for us. And that very next day, the head of planning, the head of creative said, we have to take over digital. And when they did that, they tried to make it like television. Make it simple. You guys make it too complex. It's too hard. We're going to make it simple. We're going to make it like television. And that opened the door for a bunch of ad tech companies to come in and say, we got the formula, and you don't have to look under the hood. And our own industry created that opaqueness because they didn't want to look under the hood. They didn't want to hire the people who had the expertise, and they didn't want to push it. And so we ended up with a bunch of holding companies, with a bunch of ad tech companies, where they were pocketing all the profits. And by the way, digital didn't spring up from this pure, integrity-laden industry of advertising, of television, print, and radio. I mean, it hasn't been an opaque business since the get-go. If you look at the beginning of print, if you look at the beginning of radio, if you look at the beginning of TV, it hasn't been an industry that's really been on the up and up all the way. So I welcome the FTC coming in and getting expertise, but I think we have to set our own rules and regulations. We have to clean up our own house, and we have to start investing in the expertise to deal with a complex, fragmented communications landscape. We didn't create it. It exists, but you have to have the expertise to understand how to navigate and move through it. And if you don't do that, you're going to continually get opaqueness because you're not going to want to look under the hood.
This all sounds great, and it sounds like we do need some kind of oversight. And yes, we do need to take a firmer hand on our own industry and be more ethical about it. But I keep looking back at what happened to the FCC, as opposed to the FTC, with Ajit Pai being a lobbyist or working in the cell industry, and then suddenly turning around and net neutrality's gone, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, are ad tech professionals really the best people that we can get to monitor ad tech professionals? Is that the right way to go through it, you know? Because it's like we're just hiring from the industry, and now we have insiders who are able to navigate the halls of Washington and make it a little bit easier to do what we've been doing. That's my biggest concern about all this. But Lisa, I'd love your thoughts on this. This isn't your space in particular, doing programmatic advertising and that type of stuff, which is the main concern in all of this in terms of ad tech. But I mean, this impacts you as well to a certain extent, doesn't it?
Yeah, we've been struggling with ad tech anyways because, more and more people want to have pixels on everything. And, it's really interesting with the IAB coming into the podcast world. And now everybody's got version 2, they're IAB compliant or they're IAB certified. And what's really interesting is, we've been having to go right along this whole wave of them trying to figure out our world. And they don't even have that right. We had 2 IAB certified companies count our numbers for a year. There was a 40% swing between both of them. So my attitude is I feel like my whole problem too then after that is I had to add ad tech when it comes to additional podcast attribution. Because as you know, a coupon code or going to a landing page isn't the best way to track an effectiveness of an ad either. So we've been on this ride because we've been the guinea pigs of them setting a lot of this ad tech in place. So it's great that the FTC is seeking pros, but I wish they would pull in people from networks as well as people that work at the ad tech companies, because I really don't think you can do this by only looking at one piece. As a matter of fact, the ad company that we chose for additional podcast attribution, the people that work there have worked on both sides of the fence. They worked for networks and they worked for agencies. So they actually brought together the concerns from both sides. So my whole attitude in the FTC doing this, it's like, okay, that's really great that you're looking at the ad tech companies, but can you at least go talk to some of the networks that, because I really don't feel the ad tech companies are looking out for or looking at the entire picture. They're there for the advertisers. That's all that their concerns are. Whereas networks should have some say in how this works as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this. And as somebody who's been a guinea pig in this whole process over the last 3 years, it's been an interesting ride, and we'll see how it evolves. But we just added some additional ad tech to our network, and I only signed with a company that actually had both people's interests in heart, because they've worked on both sides of the fence. And I think that's going to be super important that the FTC talks to both sides.
Well, that subject goes nowhere at this point. Because it's just like, I think we've said all we can say on this. I mean, there's no way for us to know what the result's going to be of having ad tech professionals be involved with this. I mean, I think it would be nice to have a world where we had what Doug described, where we took a more firm hand in terms of managing this process ourselves. Government regulation, increased government regulation is not the answer. It just mucks the works up. It just makes problems down the line. It would be better if we were more ethical about it. The trouble is there is no ethics among thieves, and there's so much of the programmatic ad space and the ad tech space that's just been smoke and mirrors, which is what COVID has been revealing and what we've been covering on the show. Like, so much of it has just been reselling ads and no technology behind it whatsoever. That kind of stuff just gives you a sour taste in your mouth, and how do you manage that process? But well, I'm sure we'll be covering this a lot in the coming weeks. Last but not least, GIPHY, the purveyor of animated GIFs. If you haven't seen them, you should check them out. They're seeing a huge spike in usage during the pandemic. Saul, is it time to reconsider them as part of the average brand's marketing strategy? I mean, you use GIFs, I use GIFs, everybody uses GIFs. Brands constantly put out GIFs, shows put out GIFs. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, in terms of incorporating them into a marketing strategy of any note going forward?
So I'm a little torn on this. So, uh, you know, yes, gifts are amazing. I use them and things like that because honestly, the 4 to 5, um, emotions that Facebook give you or the simple heart Instagram gives you isn't enough to convey something interesting. And it's a shame that it took so many people to die for the world to learn how to use the gifts and things like that. But it also shows that as a society, we're kind of moving away from typed communication. But neither here nor there. I digress. Should brands use them? I don't really think so. I think brands should supply people to use them, and they should create gifts around their content. But this should be something that should be left kind of to the people. This should be the voice of the people, and let it be an expression of their humor or whatever. And so it's like, should Nike be using gifts themselves? Nah, but make 800 Michael Jordan gifts and push them into the system and let people pick and choose. But it's just kind of, brands ruin everything when they try to do it. And maybe someone like a Burger King or a Wendy's who have already established a personality of being a little edgy, they can maybe dabble with it. But I'd have no problems if every TV show made 100 gifts based on their content, and every brand made 100 gifts, but they shouldn't use them. Keep this as something like these should be like the expression of people, and let them pick and choose what they want.
And I think I got my show title with "Dying to GIF."
There you go.
One last question about this, and I'm going to go to Doug on this. I mean, Saul's right. Brands ruin everything, but there is something about GIPHY and the GIF revolution that I didn't understand at first, that I do understand now, and that I see a real opportunity for brands to play some kind of meaningful role in this going forward. I mean, when I first heard about GIPHY, it was at a conference in New York at the Manhattan Center, I think. And the presentation I saw talked about GIFs. The founder of GIPHY talked about GIFs as being a new language of communication. And if this is a new language of communication, an opportunity to speak to consumers, to speak to others via these messages, isn't that making this essential for every brand to master? Because if it's part of the communication lexicon, it's just like emoticons. You got to learn some way to use this communication in order to effectively communicate to your audience, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the interest of a good podcast, I'm going to disagree with Sean and say that a lot of the brands that we've worked with, two come to mind: Purple Mattress and Kate Spade. When we shoot content for them, we're shooting vertical, horizontal, short form, long form, and we're doing it all in one day in one tabletop studio. And part of that is we're pulling animation from that. So if you break down GIPHY as two, I usually do it in two categories. One is just straight up short animated GIF. The second is an expression. You're expressing something within that GIF. For example, on Kate Spade, we did a project where it was Make It Mine. They have purses where you can put a new purse on top of an existing base and change up your purse, right? This was the perfect medium for an animated GIF, right? Because you can show it really fast. We shot it with triplets. We pulled tons of content out of that, and we got a whole asset library from one shoot. That, in my opinion, is what needs to happen, because you have to look at your complete channel distribution strategy. You have to look at your communication strategy, and then you have to do your shoot schedule from there. You can't just shoot a 15 and a 30 or a piece of video and then expect to pull all this stuff out of it. You've got to plan ahead of time. For Purple Mattress, we did a live broadcast at 2 a.m. on Facebook of a woman brushing her hair, of a guy reading a book, anything that would put people to sleep who were still awake. And there were huge numbers on Facebook trying to go back to sleep. And we had animated GIFs out of that worked on paid media later on. So I think it's absolutely a complete strategy. We just started working on the TikTok account for the Argentine government. And we're looking at a broader content strategy for them. And part of that includes animated GIFs, because that's a great way to communicate to people to wear masks, to stay 6 feet apart, to wash your hands, and they get it in seconds, right? And I think we have to really understand both the long and deeper form of communication as well as the short, more punchy form of communication for brands, and how that spectrum applies to them, and what mix applies to what brand in what context. So I'm a big fan of GIPHY, and I'm a big fan of animated GIFs.
No, good points all. Good points all. Well, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Saul Colt. You can find him at let's try this again, theideaintegration.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Saul. What would you like to promote?
So I got a couple things going on. Obviously, still want to talk to as many people as possible. I've done about 219 free consulting calls. If anyone's interested, they can go to calendly.com/coffee with Saul, Saul. Some people spell it like Sean, but it's Saul. And other than that, I've got a podcast that I put up, and this week will be me talking to the BeanCast very own Bob Norp. So if you guys are interested with that, check out saultalks.com, SAULTAALKS.
And we didn't talk marketing. We didn't talk marketing at all. Almost there was almost no marketing.
You're going to learn a lot about Bob. And then lastly, always want to help people, brands. If you're looking for content creation, creative marketing, there's still opportunities to do really interesting experiential stuff right now, as well as some very different kind of visionary awareness stuff. Please reach out. Check out my website, theideaintegration.com.
Fantastic. Next up, we have Lisa Laporte. You can find her at twit.tv or artisanalagency.com. Both are working addresses that will get you to where she is and find out who she's about and what's going on over there at the Twit Network. Tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote?
Well, I'd like to promote our Twit TV network. People, subscribe to all of our shows if you're interested in tech, and if you're interested in reaching our qualified audience, because where else are you going to go? Please email me at lisa@twit.tv. But more importantly, I feel that it's super important that everybody subscribe to all of their favorite podcasts. Help support the media that's out there. Help keep us relevant.
Fantastic. Yeah. As I've said many times before, I modeled this show after a lot of the stuff that was going on at Twit, so one of my favorite networks. Last but not least, Doug Livingston. You can find him at together-w.com. That's together with. Tell us what's going on in your world. Doug, what would you like to promote?
So we're continuing to build on our communications architecture of the 3 H's, help, hope, and happiness. We're coming out with HEAL, and that we hope will help brands figure out their communication strategy and where they can be in the marketplace and be successful. We are also launching teams on Monday. So brands and agencies who may be experiencing difficulties with layoffs or can't handle capacity, we have full-time teams in both digital and creative production that brands can have dedicated to them 100% for the entire year. And so that starts on Monday.
That sounds so interesting. I loved when you brought up the 3 H's. It's such a fascinating way to look at the problem. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me about getting your brand's podcast off the ground. And you can even find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it is time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, we mentioned, I forget who it was. I think it might have been Saul or Lisa talking about the McDonald's puzzle. I think it was Lisa. But the McDonald's puzzle was interesting, but I thought the Heinz ketchup puzzle was just incredible, Lisa. I mean, it's just like this thing was just so perfect. You know, jigsaw puzzles are already impossible to do, and they're so popular right now under quarantine. And to just give a red one, a solid red block of 550 puzzle pieces, is so diabolically clever and awful at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. When I saw the red one, I was like, ew, I don't want that. But you can send me the Big Mac. But I think it is humorous. I mean, right now I think people need to laugh a little bit more and, kind of do something challenging in this crisis. So this might be it.
And, it's we talked about retail needing to think about themselves as, ultimately shareable, creating shareable moments for influencers. What a shareable moment to be the one person who finishes that puzzle and be able to share it. It's just like, that's the kind of thing that gets them attention and gets the influencers who do these types of things the opportunity to shine on their own merit. Yeah. Now the fail for the week, I'm going to go with the New York Times sets a subscription record and they still can't sell ads, Doug. I mean, it's incredible to me that they set an all-time subscription level high, and yet nobody wants to advertise on them digitally because it's talking about COVID and nobody wants to advertise on that kind of content.
Yeah, but the New York Times has some really phenomenal access to content and creative. Like when you look at their charts and graphs, when you look at their videos, when you look at their 3D and AR work, they really have tremendous resources, and I don't think they leverage them enough to connect with brands and to help brands create the right messaging and content for the medium that they have. So it's a real failure, I think, on the management and the structure of the Times not keeping up with their own content capability and connecting that with their advertisers.
Yeah, it's too bad because you're absolutely right. They have such a wealth of content, such a wealth of opportunity that's being squandered. Well, the foul of this week, as Upfronts continues, as buyers are expected to exercise as much as 25% of their cancellation options. Let me say, I was setting this up and I totally messed it up. Upfronts are continuing and ad buyers are expected to exercise as much as 25% of their cancellation options. This is ugly, Saul. We talk about TV, being still an important medium, still a medium that people turn to, still getting big viewership under quarantine, and yet 25% of the brands out there are going to exercise their cancellation options on their upfront buys with really no reason for it other than fear of the future.
So I don't know if it's fear of the future. This kind of goes back to the sponsor of tonight, Methodify. I don't think brands know what to say. And again, I'm using the word brand when I really mean, a handful of real people who are decision makers. And without knowing what to say, you're never wrong by saying no. That old expression. I don't agree with it, but that is the expression. So I think this speaks to people, people are less afraid of contracting COVID. They're ready to run out to malls than they are risking their career and making an ad that is a mistake. So it's just really easy to just bail out. You're never wrong by saying no.
Well, this has been a fascinating discussion. And if you'd like to, you know what? It's just like I took my script a couple weeks ago and took away my close for the ad fail 5 or the fair fail foul, and it's just like, and I never I get to this point in the script and I still haven't replaced it, so I have no idea what I'm supposed to say now. It's one of these things that, it's just like you remember, I got to fix that next week, and I don't. So if you'd like to discuss this, or if you'd like to be part of this conversation online, go to the hashtag, use the hashtag #FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's edition of the BeanCast. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
It's like, you know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.